Hello, and welcome to today's episode of the Authentic Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Jill Simons, and I'm so excited to grow in the radical art of standing in what God says about you with you today. The show is a place where we pour into the sense of who God is, who we are, and how we can live more in the freedom that He has for us every single day. Welcome to today's episode of the Authentic Uprising podcast. I am your host, Jill Simons, and I am happy to be here with you today. Today, we're going to be talking about a really interesting question that I think doesn't get reflected on very frequently, but it's really helpful. It really helps us to clarify a lot of things about our lives. And so that question is, what is a belief, and can or should we change them? I think that this is something that might seem like a scary question to talk about within like a Christian circle, because we don't necessarily want people going around and changing their belief if they believe in God or if they believe in their Christian faith. We want that to be something that stays, right? We want to support people in continuing on in their life of faith. But I think once we get into the conversation a little bit, we'll see how belief applies to more than just our faith as a, entity, and how this can be a helpful conversation to have. So, as always, definition of terms, super helpful. A belief is something, it sounds really, basic, but something that we believe to be true. And so when we look at that definition, a belief is not tied to reality, right? A belief is not based on what is true, it's based on what we believe. And so, because of that, there are beliefs that we choose, that we have really cooperated with intentionally throughout our lives, but there's also beliefs that we just kind of fall into. And it's very helpful to cultivate the level of self-awareness to address and assess which is which. Which are the beliefs that we have chosen, that we invest in, that we want to further, and which are the beliefs that are just kind of defaults that have developed throughout our life without really our conscious cooperation with those beliefs. And so for a lot of people, it's not unheard of that there's someone who just kind of persists in Christian faith from childhood to adulthood with no kind of variation or questioning or anything like that. I guess it is possible, but it's sort of unlikely. Every person that I know and myself, there was really a point at which we were like, okay, are we going to do this for real? Or is this just something that's a holdover from childhood? Maybe that is kind of a default if somebody hasn't really questioned it. But the majority of adults that I know, at least in my circle, had a point where they maybe consciously left the church, stopped being active in their faith, went through an active period of questioning their faith where they really looked for answers for all of the specific questions that they have. That was kind of my story. I didn't ever leave the church or anything like that. But in college, I basically literally had a list of questions and I was like, okay, I need to be convinced about this. I need to be convinced about this. I need to be convinced about this. And so I specifically chose a college based on them having the theology personnel for me to be able to go to them and be like, okay, one of the best minds in our church, explain this to me, explain this to me, explain this to me. And I was very intentional about the fact that if that was unsatisfactory, I was going to leave. But I was willing to give my faith the benefit of the doubt and actually find the best of the answers. And that's what does vary. You have some people who don't really give their faith the benefit of the doubt and might just abandon it quickly. And that's where we see it's not really a belief that they had chosen. It's a belief that was a default that they wanted to get rid of because it didn't feel like it was serving them anymore. Not because it doesn't serve them in reality, but because that was their perception. And so clearly beliefs are more complex than just, I want to believe this, my faith tells me this, etc. And so this is where a personal inventory of belief is really, really helpful. There is a like a template PDF that you can download in the show notes that's just for you to do a belief inventory. What do you believe? There's no benefit to like lying on this or to being duplicitous with yourself. The only person who's going to suffer from that is you. So it benefits you immensely to be extremely honest when you are looking at the scope of all of your beliefs and looking at what is it that I truly believe is true. Not just about God, not just about faith, but just about everything. What do I believe about myself? What do I believe about my work? What do I believe about money? What do I believe about my family? What do I believe about where I live, the time I live, our culture at large, all of these things. I got too excited and I hit the mic. Sorry. We can question all of these beliefs and really drill down on what it is that we believe about these things. And the best way to do this is through writing. It's really, really helpful to take some time to actually write out. And that's why we have this inventory available for you where it has lots of different prompts for all of these different areas of life, spaces for you to write what you believe about, fill in the blank on a variety of topics so that it's not you just kind of trying to think of things as you sit there taking this inventory. And when you have that, then you want to look at this list of beliefs. And then you want to assess what, using kind of your rational mind versus your maybe irrational mind that developed some of these default beliefs. And I don't say that in a derogatory way at all. All of us do this. This is just like a function of having a human life. And an example of that might be something like, as a child in a dance production, someone made a comment about your size relative to the other children, maybe in the production, and that formed the basis for a belief that you something about yourself, something about weight in general, something about performance, could be a variety of things. And so that is something that just kind of organically bubbled up inside of you based on a situation. And it's never probably, unless you're a very reflective person, which go you, that is a very good habit to have, to be very self-reflective. It's probably not something that you have specifically kind of brought to light, embodied, held up, looked at, and interacted with. You have probably just always let that be. And that's typically what happens unless you go through kind of an aggressive self-reflection time. And so when we bring all of these beliefs up and to the forefront, then we can look at this list of beliefs and say, okay, which of these is actually true? And you might say, well, how do we know what is true? As Christians, we're always going to go back to God's word. We're always going to look at God's word and say, is this true based on what God says? Is this true based on the teachings of my faith as a whole? And is this true based on what I know about God? When we do that, then we have the opportunity to kind of highlight beliefs that aren't helpful. They don't serve us. They don't build us up. They don't build up the kingdom of God. There maybe are places where there's actually tension with God in us because we're holding on to something that's contrary to what he says. And so when we have places like this, I think it's self-evident that it is beneficial to change these beliefs. We want to go through a process of actually rooting these things up and intentionally picking better beliefs. And this is what Dr. Caroline Leaf's neuroscientific research has shown extensively, is that we have the ability to root up negative beliefs in our mind and plant better ones through intentional use of our brain. And so there's an excellent book that she has written. She's written many, and you could really start with any of them and be very successful. But I really like Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. She's also got several other ones that I'll link in the show notes that are very helpful for this idea of how do we alter our long-standing beliefs. And we want to alter these beliefs not because we decide what's true. We want to come into alignment with what is already true. Because if you think about like being in a river, as long as you're swimming against the current, you're going to be working so much harder than you have to. And so in this example, that current and how it's moving is the truth. We want to be moving with the truth. And you think about how effortless that is. If you're like on a float trip on a river, you're in an inner tube and the current is just moving you along rapidly, seamlessly, effortlessly, because it's going the direction that is naturally occurring. But if we're trying to swim upstream, if we're trying to get that same inner tube to go the opposite direction, we are going to be constantly working, constantly fighting, rowing, doing everything. And the progress we're going to make is going to be so incremental. If there is any progress, it's a lot of work to just stay in one place if you're trying to go against the current. That's what happens when we are holding on to beliefs that are out of keeping with reality. And so I really recommend Dr. Leaf's book. I also really recommend using what we talked about last week in our episode here on the podcast about declarations. If you haven't listened to that episode yet, I encourage you to go back and listen to it when you're done with that one, because declarations are a great tool for changing your beliefs, bringing your beliefs into greater alignment with what is already true. And like I mentioned last week, this is a huge tenet upon which our company is built. Pink Salt Riot makes all kinds of things based on this idea that we can actually cooperate in how our brain is wired based on the things that we see, the things that we repeat, the messages that permeate our lives. And so that's why we create so many different products that have messages on them. We use words extensively throughout all of our pieces. And the purpose for that is because we want to be always moving our brain into greater alignment with the truth. And that doesn't happen by accident. We don't just fall into great alignment with the truth. That is, I think, maybe the number one effect. Besides the existence of sin itself, the number one effect of the fall is that it takes conscious awareness and effort to go with the current. We're not just natively like, oh, we get in the river and we all just float down the river. We have this instinct to fight and go the other direction. And it obviously is just a self-defeating cycle where we end up worn out, frustrated, confused, but unaware of why. We have no idea why we are so tapped out, because we are not even aware that we are protecting and holding so tightly to these beliefs that are making it so challenging for us to move forward. And to move forward easily and effortlessly when we get into that flow of truth. Doesn't mean that there's not challenges in life and bumps in the road and all those things. But if you think about your life, if you lived with total trust in God, total trust in His providence, total trust in His provision, and total trust that He will really and truly work all things together for your good, pretty much regardless of the situation. And obviously there's going to be varying difficulty levels, but regardless of the situation, you could really be living that going with the flow of the river. You could really be in peace in the midst of kind of whatever is going on. Because if you're not worried about your physical needs, if you're not worried about things working out according to God's plan, if you're not worried about your own physical safety and life, you are truly free. And that's the other thing that we talk about so much here at Pink Salt Riot, is that we want to help you do these things because we want to give you freedom. We want you to, and let me rephrase, we want you to access the freedom that you already have. This is not generating freedom out of nowhere. We're not creating anything. on that front as a company. We're trying to be like your Sherpa, your freedom Sherpa. That's our new tagline. We're trying to walk you from where we all start into the freedom that God ultimately has for you. And I really like that. I think that Freedom Sherpa is going to be like my new Instagram bio tagline, because that is very accurate. And if you don't know what a Sherpa is, Sherpas are, I believe it's like an ethnic term for the race of people that live towards the base of Mount Everest. I could be wrong about the genesis of that word and its etymology, but I believe that it is a term describing this ethnic group that lives right by the base of Mount Everest, and they are typically the guides that help climbers go up Mount Everest, basically. And so they have, the term has huge connotations of being a guide and a companion for challenging journeys and really helping people to reach somewhere that they're capable of reaching, but they need someone to go with them. And so that's very much how I view myself, and all the work that we do here at Pink Salt Riot is just helping walk alongside you as you go on your journey to stepping into the fullness of this freedom that God has for you. There's going to be so many people in your lives that speak into this. There's going to be other authors and podcasts and books and friends and family members and experiences that all speak into this. But we want to be a reliable place that you can come back to again and again and really get fed and get led on this front. So I'm so thankful that you're along for the ride with us on that. I'm also so excited as we move into the summer. We're going to be building a lot more things as my precious, wonderful child moves on, graduates to daycare, and my bandwidth opens back up. We are going to be creating a lot more resources, not just for forming you as an individual, which we'll always do and we'll always be passionate about. We want to create even more resources for you to understand how to form the young people that you speak into in your life. And that's not exclusively for parents. What we're going to create is not specifically parenting resources. We want to create resources for general mentorship of young people. How do we lead young people by example, whether you are their parent or their teacher or their religious education instructor or their aunt or their friend? How do we demonstrate through our lives a way forward for young people? Because as I have mentioned in the past, truth is not a hallmark of public discourse right now. There is a huge, huge lack of truth in our world, and this affects no one more acutely than our young people who don't have experience, who don't know where else to look. And they are willing and able to find so much that is false quickly and on demand in our world. But I will take to my deathbed the belief that seeing real human beings in their life that embody something that they have never seen before, a kind of joy, a kind of peace, a kind of hope that they have never experienced in their own lives and they have not seen in the people speaking into their lives in the culture, that can start conversations and start people down paths that change the next generation. We have to offer them a hopeful way forward. And that starts with how we live, but that also starts with how we are empowered to speak into them. So we have amazing experts, wonderful people on board to work with us this summer to help create those resources for you. And we could not be more excited to start doing that. So please stick with us, and we will be bringing that to you throughout the summer. Share this podcast or YouTube channel with someone who is in that phase of life, who is needing resources to speak more effectively into the lives of the young people in their lives. We would love to grow this community and walk with as many people as possible, because every single individual in the community speaks life into other people, can share their experience, and just help us all to do better. I hope that you have a wonderful week. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the Authentic Uprising podcast. It is always a joy to be with you. I encourage you to subscribe to our podcast, subscribe to our YouTube channel, whichever place you most prefer, or do it all if that is what floats your boat. We would love to continue to get to know you better and grow in relationship with you. And so I encourage you to check out the links in both our show notes and our YouTube description that tell you more about where you can connect with us elsewhere. The two big things we have going on besides the podcast is our shop that is full of reminders of who you are in God, helping you to really grow in that radical art of standing in who you are and giving gifts that help others to do the same. The other big thing we have going on is the Uprising Academy. This is all of our formation programs, workshops, retreats. Everything is available virtually and on demand, where you can sign up and continue to learn more about radically standing in what God says about you, especially if you are in a place in your life where you are not being fed the way that you long to be fed. Whether it's in your community, whether it's at your church, whatever it is, there is more for you, and we can absolutely walk with you into it through the Uprising Academy. All those links are in our show notes, and if you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to leave a review. Reviews are the number one way that we help get in front of new faces, new people that are able to be touched by the radical art of standing in what God says about us. I love you. I'm praying for you. I hope you have an amazing week.